All right, here we are, episode 2
Wow.
of Bridge the Gap. Yeah, I know, look at that.
That's cool.
And we're here with Chloe Earle. Chloe spent last year, was it last year?
Yeah.
Okay, last year in Italy. And so she's here with us. She's going to share her story a little bit. So why don't you let's just start off. Why don't you just give us a little bit about you, your background, where you're from, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So I went to Italy on the 2023-2024 gap year. And I'm from Georgia and I'm 19 years old. I graduated from high school and then took the summer and went straight on my global year. But I've grown up in a Christian home and surrounded by family and friends. And I have 4 siblings. My brother, actually, Caleb, is the field leader in Italy. So I got to spend time with him. And
where are you in the order of your
I'm
siblings?
the youngest.
Okay, that's right.
Yep. The youngest and the baby. But yeah.
What was that like, being the baby?
It was good. I feel like it had its perks in its way.
Yeah.
But also, there's also the downfalls of it, like getting the hand-me-downs and all that. But I mean, for the most part, it was good. I got spoiled a lot.
I was going to say, yeah. Yeah, I feel like being the baby is, you get spoiled and you get disciplined the least.
yeah,
Like,
exactly.
that's a part of being the baby.
Especially like with older siblings. Like Caleb was always like, I'd be getting in trouble or something for like drawing on the walls with the crayon or something, and he'd come home and mama would be like getting on to me or something, and Caleb would be like, "What are you doing? Why are you getting on to her?" And he'd be like, "Don't do that."
Yeah.
And he'd be like, "Come on, Chloe," and like get me candy or something. Like I was spoiled. Like I feel like I was spoiled more by my older brother than anybody.
That's awesome.
But,
That's so sweet.
That is
yeah, it was
super
fun.
sweet. So tell us a little bit, like, you graduated high school. What was it like trying to figure out what was next? Did you feel pressure to go to college, or like kind of the social thing, or did you grow up with not? Because like the way I grew up, I feel like we were never pressured to go to school, but some people were. What was your experience like?
From my parents, I never really had like a pressure of going to school after like high school, because I mean all my siblings went to school. But for me, they kind of just wanted me to do something that interests me and like go on my own path of what the Lord was calling me to do. And whether that was going to school, or if that was going on a global year, if that was just staying and working, or whatever it was, they were supportive in that, and they really did a great job of like making that known. Like that, I never felt pressured to like I had to go to college, or I had to go this one route. But they really supported me in whatever I did, so it was really great, and I got to like make my own decision on going on a global year. So
That's awesome.
yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah. I can't remember if we talked about it. Did you feel like pressure? I mean, you went to college, I know that, but was that like expected?
I don't think for my parents it was. They just said that I had to do something. So whether that was kind of like what you said, working or going to school or something else. But I feel like in my high school, it felt pressured because like colleges would, like even starting in 11th grade, like they were like, okay, the SAT, ACT are the most important tests you're going to take. Like if you want to get into college, you have to pass these. And like we would get out of class to do like college prep type stuff. And so it seemed like that was the only option.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to go to college, even though I had no clue like what I want to go for.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think a lot of our listeners or people who are considering a gap year or not, like I feel like just culturally and socially, people feel that pressure, you know, and we talked about it last time with Sydney, but I think people just in general feel a sense of like there's an expectation, and I think that's shifting. I don't know how you read that with, like, I'm a little older, so it's like I don't have my finger like super on the pulse of like, but I see it enough to where it's like, even with just the money thing, you know, you see it there. Like people, you know, have a hard time with sometimes with the cost of like what a gap year would cost, but like have no problem paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to go to school. So you can just see the contrast of like the expectation and the pressure. So, but I think that's great that your family kind of just championed whatever it was that you wanted.
Yeah.
I felt that a lot too growing up, just like kind of like, yeah, whatever you want to do, we got you, you know? And I think that's cool. Like with, especially if you have some guidance too, and it's not like whatever you want to do, but you have nobody to like really lean into. Cause you know, we see that too, and that can get like reckless, but it's nice when you have support, you know, for whatever dream you want to pursue, but also because obviously we know like college is not the only option. And I think a part of us doing this is like, we want students to know there are other options. So for you, like, what was the process like of deciding like a gap year or taking a year off was for you, and how did you like land on doing that? And then I guess too with global year, because, and then this may be an obvious answer for you, but there are other options, you know, when it comes to gap year programs. So what was that process like in deciding, and like how did God lead you to that?
Yeah. So I think in high school, I knew that I didn't want to go to college already. So I was like, well, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
And so like, what's something, and I wanted to be a flight attendant for the longest time since like 9th grade. So I was like, well, what's something that I can like be intentional about my time and like spending that time while like being at a high school, but like waiting to be a flight attendant, because I had to be like 20 or 21 to apply. Which is not really the route that I want to go anymore. But at the time and through my global year, that was really what I wanted to do. And so like, I feel like I was like looking into things, and my brother Caleb is the field director in Italy with global year. And so but when he moved to Italy and I was like, oh, he's moving to Italy. Like he got like a job with ministry, but I didn't even know what he was doing there. You know, like I didn't even know he was doing a gap year program, like leading students or anything. And, I started looking into, doing a gap year, because some of my friends in high school were going to, Impact 360, the students, like some of my friends that were like a year older than me. And I looked into doing Impact 360, but the more I looked into it, I just realized I was like, okay, this is a great program, but it's not really what I want to, it's not really what, is what I kind of want to do. Cause I wanted to be more hands-on and more like in country and doing more and, in that way. And so, then I talked more. My dad was like, hey, like looking into the gap year, like you should see what Caleb's doing, you know? And I was like, what do you mean what Caleb's doing? And he was like, oh yeah, he's doing like, you know, he's got them students over there. And I was like, oh yeah, I guess, yeah, I should look into that. And so, I talked to Caleb about it, and he was like, he kind of told me about it, and he was like, you know, I'd love for you to come to Italy, but I want you to pray about all the different locations and like wherever you feel like the Lord's calling you, like once you like discern that. And I had already been to Italy for a camp, and I had already kind of gotten a taste of what the ministry was like there in a way, and knew some people. And so, I mean, I kept praying about it, and I felt really led to go to Italy, and that was through Global Year. So that's how I heard about Global Year, was through my brother. But that's cool. Yeah, that's how I got intertwined with Global Year and my doing that. So
totally. So what, for the people listening, like students who are considering this, like what was maybe a challenge that you faced, like post deciding to go? Like, cause obviously there's some like preparation financially, raising support, whatever. what was some of the challenges that you faced in that short season, whether it was like support raising, training, whatever?
For me, there was definitely the support raising part. And there's other parts too that I can talk about, but the support raising really made me anxious because of how much it was. But I was like, if I'm really supposed to go on this global year, if it's really what God like has and like what he wants to, the way he wants to form me and the way the impact, if I'm going to make an impact there, like he'll make it happen. And if he wants me there, he'll make it happen. And through the fundraising process, like I was like, oh, like this isn't going to happen. Like there's there's no way I'm going to raise this money. Like, but then over and over, like God kept showing me like, you need to stop doubting me because like this, I'm going to provide for you, And there was this one time where like I needed like this certain amount because sometimes they like break it up into monthly things. Yeah. And so I needed a certain amount to like make the monthly like budgeting. Yeah. And the amount that I needed, we were selling my camper, our camper, and he had it. I think my dad had it for like maybe lower. And the guy offered it for like the exact amount that I needed. Wow. for my fundraising. And I was like, and I literally was at church that night. I was at youth and I kind of just went off. I called my dad and he was like, hey, like trying to get this sold, but like just pray that it's like working out. And so like I was sitting over there and I was like praying. I was like, and I just, there was so much. And then one of my friends came over and a leader from the church, they were coming over, they were like, hey, like you good? And I was like, yeah, I'm just like super stressed about like this fundraising. Like it's really stressing me out recently. And one of my friends prayed over it. And then my dad called me like after, like literally like right after and was like, hey, we sold it for like the exact amount you needed. And I was like, wow. It was, yeah, so awesome. It was like, so dang, like, yeah, that's it was so just awesome. Like mind blowing. Like,
I think we have like, and we talk about this all the time. I feel like almost every single person who does a gap year has a story like that. Like, I mean, I have the story where a lady got a check from, it was like a tax refund or something. And it was the exact amount I needed, Yeah. I'm sure Leah, you have the story too, so it's like everybody seems, it's like just the faithfulness and the provision of God. Like when he calls you to do something, he's going to provide, you know, it seems like a sure thing. Like, I don't know, it's crazy to say that sometimes, but it's like, it just feels like it happens over and over and over, where it's not just like, oh, someone gave me $10. It's like, no, like this crazy amount, the exact amount I needed or whatever. It's just like stories, hundreds of stories like that, so that's awesome.
But some other ways I feel like that were a little bit hard for me preparing for my like year, like what the process was of like fundraising. We just talked about that, but also before going on my global year, I just felt really like I was inadequate, if that makes sense. Like
totally.
I grew up in the church, so I know all these things, but I was like, I feel like I don't really have a super strong relationship. Or just like the fear of like comparison. Like I was like, I'm just going to get there. And just mainly at training, I was like, these people, they know so much more than me. They have experienced more than me. They've, like they know the answers, but I was just like looking at it like this, like requirement of like what I was supposed to, be. And, I just really fought with that of like, okay, well, like, why am I going on this if I'm not even good enough to go? What do I have to offer? And I really struggled that, especially when I first got to training and we were all in a classroom and I'm like struggling with this like comparison of I
remember that.
Yeah, like I talked to you through that, you and Sydney. Like I talked to y'all a lot about that because in a way, I was like, I already had this like preconception that everybody there was already ahead of me, and which wasn't the case. Like I didn't need to compare myself to know that God had me there for a reason, and he was preparing me, even if I wasn't in the same place as everybody else. It's not just about having the answers and knowing everything, but that God was going to form me and he was going to grow me in all these ways too. Like I was just looking at it as like, I need to go into this. I need to have all the answers. I need to know what to say in every moment. I need to like blah, 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 check off all these things before I'm able to be considered a missionary.
Wow. Yeah.
But it was like, that's not true. Like I have so much to offer just because I have Christ within me. And so that was another thing that I struggled with as well, was just
I think it's good for people to hear. Like that. It's not like, I think that it's okay to feel inadequate. It's okay to like feel like you don't measure up, because the truth is the only requirement is that you show up. You know, like that you're faithful to show up and do what God's called you to do. And because we're all gonna feel at times inadequate. You know, we're gonna feel like less than. We're gonna compare ourselves. Hopefully we don't, but we all find ourselves in that spot. But to be able to resort back to the truth, which is like, no, like we are qualified because of what Jesus did for us, not because of what we've done for ourselves. So that's good to.
I feel like I struggled with that same thing too. Like. Thinking in my head that like being a missionary, like you had to meet all of these requirements and like be so knowledgeable and know all of these things. And then when I went overseas, I was like, oh, like these are just normal people that are just living in a different country that just got called over here to do ministry over here. Like they're just being obedient.
Yeah. Totally.
So now we'll move to your experience being in Italy. What did God teach you during your time in Italy that you did not expect? Probably a lot of things.
What was just not to like back up too far and then jump forward, but I'm curious, like, what was your expectation?
My expectation,
what was your expectation of what God was going to teach you before like your preconceived thing? Like,
I think going into that, also relating to what I just said about like meeting all the requirements, I was like, okay, well, when I get on my global year and I come back home, like I'll be like set, you know, like I'll know everything. I'll have the answers then, like, you know. And so I feel like in a way I kind of went into my global year with a lot of expectations, and that took away from a lot of the experiences from my global year, because I had so many expectations already. And I wish I didn't. I wish I went into it and was like, okay, whatever this looks like, whatever this is going to be, like, I'm just going to let it be and let the Lord get the glory for what it is. And, I feel like I did go into it with a lot of expectations of like, this is going to make me better. This is going to make me like more, I don't know how to say it, but like people are going to look up to me after this, or in a way, you know, kind of prideful in a way. It's like,
like people are going to admire you for doing that. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. But some ways, like, I don't know if I'm answering this right, but
no, it's fine.
But I feel like going into it, some expectations.
Like, I'm curious, hit on that a little bit, like the expectation, like, you know, that you're gonna go back home and people are gonna like admire, like, you know what I mean? Like, because I feel like we all, I don't know, I felt that same thing. Like, people, it's almost like you get in your head, like you go to Italy and people are going to be thinking about you for 9 months. And then when you come back, they're thinking about you. And I don't think that's like a unique thing. Like, I think everybody feels that. And then you realize, like, you get back and you're like, oh crap, like nobody, I mean, there's a select few people that have been praying for you, but like,
People, nobody asks
yeah, like
you
no
about
one's,
your
no one's coming out to you like,
experience.
oh, hey, you're like, wow,
Yeah. You're not
go
bombarded
Chloe,
with
you know?
people.
Yeah.
It's just, there's a small amount of people that are praying for you, that are championing you. But sometimes we get this idea that people are going to just like be thinking about us the whole time we're gone. And then, and I say that because I think, and this is what you're getting at, I think you can get let down by the fact that people don't feel that way about you, or, you know, even, and I think we've talked about this, you know, with specific people who have just said like, I thought you were going to be different, or I thought you were going to be changed, you know? And I think that can weigh heavy, like because of the expectation we have.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think it's hard too, because a lot of people don't understand like why you're exactly going over
For sure.
there. And so they don't really know what to expect when you get back
Yeah.
there.
And I think that's where, I think this would help people too that are going, that have decided to go, is like to kind of lower the expectation of like what people feel about you. You know, again, going back to like, hey, this is what God feels about me. And if you want to help ultimately your identity and security, it's ultimately just focusing in on that thing. Like, this is the truth of what God feels about me, regardless of what other people feel. Because yeah, we get our expectations up about it. And I just see that all the time. I mean, we had these conversations, like debrief all the time. Like, hey, you're going to go back you're about to step back into the world, and you're going to realize like you may be let down by like people not reaching out to you, you know? So I think that's I didn't want to skip over that, because I think that's like a real thing for a lot of people that go, and then it's like this false expectation of what they're going to find when they come back. And, and I think it's why it's so important to just ground ourselves now while you're there and after in the truth of the way God feels about you. The fact that, you know, what you take away from the experience is so much more than just what people see, you know, and what people, because people don't see most of what God does in your heart,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
I think coming back, it was like, I've also just been trying to process the whole year. Like, it's a hard thing to like process 9 months.
Yeah.
And, especially in ministry, like when you're doing so much every day. And, I think like coming back and not, especially leaving your team that you're over there with, it's kind of hard to like, when people don't ask about your year or like those things or, like that, like it's like you don't really get the chance to talk about it or like debrief, I guess, because like they don't know what you went through the past 9 months.
Right.
They don't see how you've changed.
Yes.
And while you're trying to figure out the ways that God has shaped you, because I know it was hard for me to see the way that I had changed or the things that I grew in on my global year. And, just like trying to figure out those things. When somebody says like, or you come back, somebody's like, oh, well, I haven't really seen a change in you. You know, that's a hard thing.
That's
You're like, wait, but I did change in so many ways.
And it's like, in those moments is where like, I really just have to trust God and know that what I experienced in my walk with him, like my day-to-day walk with him, what I experienced with the Lord over my global year is not something that I'm ever going to be able to explain to other people in the way that I experience it. I'm never going to be able to convince, I can to a certain extent, but you know, that heart change is between me and the Lord, and that's all that matters. I don't have to prove that to other people,
Right.
to make them accept me more or to validate that my year made a difference.
Yeah.
It's like, that's
like a low, that's like, yeah, it's like, what's the point of that? It's not helpful, you know, and it doesn't, but I didn't want to skip over that, because I think that's like that's a real experience for so many people.
Yeah.
Like we talk about it all the time, and we hear it where people are like, yeah, like I expected people to kind of I don't know. I mean, I had that experience, you know?
Yeah, I had it like most recently when I was visiting my mom in North Carolina. I was hanging out with my two closest friends from high school who I hadn't seen so long. And I was asking them questions about like things that were new in their life, like their new job and going to school. And they didn't once ask me like about my experience like overseas or like what the Lord had taught me or anything like that. And I remember getting in the car with my mom and I'm like, these are my two closest friends and they didn't care about anything that had just happened to me over the past year.
Yeah.
I know that you have shared something similar to that too, like having close people not ask you.
Oh, for sure.
About
yeah.
your-
I mean, I had a lot of that. I mean, it's interesting because my year, this is 12 years ago, however long it was, but it ended kind of in a disappointing way. Like I got sent home, so it was like, I don't almost had like the reverse of like expectation, but I think it just goes to show like what expectations do. Like they just put a thought in your head that may not be true. Like I came back kind of expecting to be like scolded because like all these people supported me. And then I was like, oh, they're going to hate me, cause I had a difficult experience, like, and it ended rough. So like, but I was met with like actually like a lot of love, but yeah, I mean, I think it's just not, I think it's important not to put a whole lot of expectations on it.
Yeah.
Not that you can't expect like, God to move and to do what he does, but not on ourselves or other people because we're going to be let down.
Yeah.
I think God is the only one we can really trust to put expectations on. So, but back to Leah's question, because I think this is important, but like, is there anything that God did teach you during your time there that you didn't necessarily expect? Like, yeah.
I think a big thing that he taught me in my like first weeks of being there was that coming from a culture that is like just I was in church on Sundays, I was on small group Sunday nights, I was at youth on Wednesdays, I was meeting outside of that with Bible study groups, like coming from being surrounded by like all of those things, like especially here in the South, like the Bible Belt is what people call it, like like being surrounded by that and then going to a different country and God, like spending time with God will look so different. And like I was like, oh, like I've really been just used to like that time being available for me and just like it being way easier to feel connected to the Lord because I had so many outlets of like being able to go to a worship night, like, or just go to small group and like connect in so many ways. And so when I went to Italy, I feel like I really got confronted of like, oh, like this is really like I'm taking this on my own now. Like, how do it's like I was just like having a hard time connecting with the Lord because I was like, I felt like I was putting my connection with the Lord in those things, like through like Sunday or going to church on Sunday, going to small group, like being on my global year, it was like, oh, now you really have to figure out what this personal relationship looks like.
Yeah.
Like what this time looks like for you, because like it's really just on your own. And so I felt like God was really teaching me to be more dependent on him in that area of like, and also just like desiring to spend more time with him. And even though, cause it just felt like a chore almost for a little bit. So I was like, okay, I'm not used to doing it this way. I'm not used to encountering the Lord just through a simple Bible study and just silence. And that wasn't something that I was used to. Yeah. And, yeah, it was just so different.
That's cool.
Yeah, I didn't expect that going because I was like, oh yeah, I experienced the Lord. Like I feel like I'm, I experience his presence all the time. Yeah. But when all of that other stuff gets stripped away and you're just left with just you and the Lord, it's like how how precious is that time to you, and how are you spending it? Like,
Yeah. I think that's like, it just shows like what God will do when you give him like undivided attention, you know, like silence and solitude and Sabbath, you know, it's like, those are the things that like, yeah, I think are just, it's unbelievable like how we can experience God here in the busyness of the Western culture. Not that Italy's not Western, but when you're giving your time and energy and you're putting it into similar things that you do here, but it's like much more intentional.
yeah,
It's like you just see God doing the work in your own heart and shaping you and molding you and forming you in different ways. And I feel like that's like the whole, like the main purpose of the experience, you know, is to find that. And that's why we send, like, because a lot of people go thinking like, oh, I'm going to do all this mission work. I'm going to impact the community and, you know, see people get saved, which totally can happen. And those are like really good things. But I feel like the main purpose of this experience is really like what happens in your heart, you know, like God will use you and he'll do things through you, but a lot of it is to form you, you know, and to shape you.
One thing
I was going to, well, you might be going here, but I was going to say like, because before we started recording, we even talked about one of the practices that you had and kind of like habits you built there was Sabbath and how that, you know.
I was just going to ask about the Sabbath.
Yeah. And how, I mean, it was cool because you mentioned something before we started that I thought was like really interesting, but how like, how's that translated? Like you built this habit and then you come back. I think this is an amazing habit. How is that translated from there with the intentionality to now being here in American culture and still trying to continue that habit, but you're facing like challenges with it? Like, what has that been like?
Yeah. Starting out Sabbath in Italy, I mean, Sabbath is never like, I feel like it's not even really brought up in the church a lot, like just taking Sabbath and resting because of the American culture of how we're just kind of like, go, 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 even in the church. But so that was like the first time I had ever really like been introduced to it. And my Sabbath there was like something that I looked forward to every week, just because it was not only just rest, but it was time that I could reconnect with the Lord. And it really meant a lot. It meant a lot to me. And I probably, at first I was like, okay, I don't even know what to do with this time. Like I kind of didn't spend it intentionally, but the more like we got to studying about like why we take Sabbath, like it changed a lot. And, but coming back, like it's been so difficult to find time to rest. And it's just been like, and especially like even just being here, like in Canton, like starting my internship, like I have my internship and then like I have my work schedule. So I'm like, okay, I don't know where to find time to rest. Just because it is like the pace of life here is so much faster and
you can feel the time. Like it's crazy. Like there's always something to do or something to be done. And I think you got to carry that intentionality back into your everyday life here. I mean, it's just like a part of it, you know, but it's like you do. I asked you because it's like there's a contrast between like that intentionality of like taking a year, like, you know what you're focusing on, but the goal of it is not just to be like, okay, I'm going to do this year and then I'm going to, you know, it's like, no, I'm going to like give God my attention to form me and change me and then apply that, you know? And so like, but people knowing like those challenges exist. Like, it's not like you're going to come back and just be like, oh yeah, everything's great. Now I'm going to serve God and be a missionary in America. You know, it's like, sometimes it's not like that. And I don't, some people do. I'm not saying that can't be your experience. I'm just saying like, there are challenges.
I feel like the hardest part about a global year is like coming back. It's like, that's
crazy,
what I've
right?
experienced. Like, that's the hardest part about a whole global year is coming back to
that's the hardest part.
States.
Then that's pretty awesome though. It is true though. It's just like transitioning.
I've been telling people that I finally have felt like I'm transitioned like back to living at home, like community and like schedule. And I've been trying to re-implement the Sabbath in like one day where I don't have to do anything. It was kind of like what Chloe said. It's so hard, but also I feel like things here are so urgent.
Yeah.
Whereas like when I was in Italy or Southeast Asia, I feel like it was a lot more like honored, and people would be like, oh, well, you can just do it another time. Like, it's not a big deal. But here it's like, oh, well, I need you to do this for me right now.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Is it? Yeah, I think you mentioned that last time, which I thought was really cool. Like the people being late and stuff to meetings and that kind of thing. It's like almost like people understand because they're not in a hurry. It's like if you're not in a hurry from one thing to the next, like, and the culture is like that, there's going to be more understanding around, like, you know, here it's just like, oh, you're super disrespectful. I can't believe you showed up late. You know what I'm saying? But I mean, and I understand both views. I'm just saying, like, it is beautiful when we slow down enough to just like not rush to the next thing. And I think a part of that is like we've become slaves to our schedules here. And I think that's probably where we need to dial back the most. It's just like, hey, let's leave some margin and space in our schedule to Sabbath, or just to spend time like with people without like there being the next thing to go to, you know? So
I think it being called, sorry.
No,
I think
you're
I think it being called like the practice of Sabbath. Like it's a practice.
It's a practice, yeah.
Like you really, because if you just go into it and you're like, yeah, I'm just gonna take this time, you know, it's like with your mind going all the time. Like I was always thinking about the next thing to do. Like I'm always thinking about, oh, what do I have to do tomorrow? What do I have to get done? And it just takes away from like the heart of Sabbath. And it's like, so it really is a practice.
Yeah, it is. We call that Sabbath.
Sabbath. Yeah.
When you take a half Sabbath.
Yeah. That's funny.
Were you going to say something before we move on to the next thing?
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say, like, it's been hard trying to find a balance between like the way that people like live their lives here, but then also like you're bringing what I enjoyed about the other cultures I lived in and like blending them together. But it's been so hard because like I'll get coffee with people and I'm like, oh, well, I really don't want to leave this person because I want to keep talking to them. But then I'm like, oh, okay, well, in 20 minutes I have to be somewhere. But I know like this conversation could keep going for 20 minutes. So then I'm like, well, do I just show up late or do I stay here?
Yeah.
If I show up late, they're not going to like that. But then I'm like, this person wants me to be here and listen to them.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, what do I do? So trying to find that balance.
Yeah. You have to kind of build the rhythms in life that you want. I mean, like we talk about in the internship is just like the control, like we don't have control of so many things, but we do have control of a few things, you know? And it's like taking those things we do control and forming them and building them the way that we feel like God would have us do that. I think our schedule is one of those things. Like if we want margin, we have to create it, you know, we have to build the life that we want to see and that honors God. And I think the Sabbath is one of those things that like, hey, honor the Sabbath and keep it holy. Like do it. And it's not like this thing you have to do, but it's this thing that's super formative. It's going to change us. And so that's great. The Sabbath. Well, just to wrap up, just a couple more thoughts and questions, because try to keep this thing at a reasonable time. But I think, here's the question. I'm just going to ask it because I think this is a great question. I think this is kind of wrapping up the whole point of the whole point of what we do. Yeah. But what advice would you give to someone considering joining Global Year, like taking a gap year or serving on a mission trip?
I mean, first advice, just, let God lead that decision. But also just going into a global year, it's like, you're going to it's only 9 months. So like that goes faster than you think it's going to. Like, so your year, yes, you're going to impact people and you're going to meet people and you're going to, you know, make relationships. And that is one of the goals, but it's gonna impact you more than like you think.
Yeah.
Like it's gonna impact you more than probably the impact that you're gonna make. And so like also like just giving advice in that, like I think the biggest thing for me was just going into it without expectation.
Yeah. That's
or like
great.
big expectations of like, because it just strips so much of the like optimistic side and the, you know, the unknown. Like there's so much God can do with the unknown, and like there's so much in that like if you just give, like make room for God to have that year. Like if you're gonna surrender that year to Him, surrender it and don't hold back in that. You know,
that's great. Yeah.
Like, and like, let the worries that you have about coming back, about like, oh, what college am I going to go to if that's the route you're going to go, or like what I'm going to do when I get back. It's like, don't dwell on those things. Like those, God already has those plans, and He's already going to lead you through that when you get off your global year. But like, if you're going to surrender that year to Him, surrender it. And be open with open hands of whatever He has to offer. Make that room for the transformation that He's going to make in your life.
That's great. I thought that was really great advice. That's awesome. I think sometimes like 9 months feels like so long.
It feels long, yeah.
Especially like at 32, 9 months is like, feels like a blip.
Yeah.
Like I remember being 18. 9 months felt like way longer when I was 18.
Yeah.
But it's just crazy. Like, if anything, like, do everything you can to slow it down and really soak it up. So I thought that was like, that's great.
Yeah, like I feel like coming back from my global year, I was like, oh my gosh.
It's already over.
What?
I know, everybody feels that way.
I was like, I feel like I should still be in Italy.
Yeah. What's something you wish you had known before going on the trip? Like that maybe you didn't, or now you know. Like something you wish you would have known that you didn't know.
Oh, definitely. I think just that the language was going to be a lot harder than I thought.
Yeah.
Like going into it, I was like, oh yeah, like I'm going to get there. I'm going to be surrounded by the language. It won't be that hard. And then I'm there and I'm like, dude, I don't understand.
You're like, I actually have to work at this.
This is like, it's something you really have to work at. So like going into that, and it's more of like just like a basic thing, but it's so important because the way you communicate with people, the way you build relationships, it's all like, first you have to learn the language, you know, like, and depending on where you go, there's going to be people that speak English, but you're coming into their culture, you're coming into their life. Like you want to be able to speak the language. And I mean, you experience that when you're there, like you experience like the want of like, oh, I want to learn the language so I can speak to this person. But yeah, that was like a lot harder than I thought. Like I went into it and I was like, I got like, I don't need Duolingo, you know, like I'll just learn it when I get there.
I'll be fluent in a week.
Yeah.
All right. So everybody considering going, you heard it first here.
Learn the language.
Learn the language as much as you can.
You have to apply yourself. Yeah. It takes effort and it takes work.
And practice it. Don't just study it.
Like don't be afraid to, I know my experience with Italy, like don't be afraid to just mess up. It's okay. And we talk about that in different ways in our internship, like in all areas. Like don't be afraid to mess up. Like, because at the end of it, like who's going to remember? I know. And in the language, everybody wants to help you. Like, especially if you're thinking about going to Italy, where Italy is the only country that speaks Italian. They're like, oh my gosh, you've come here to speak my language. Like,
and they're so grateful that you're trying.
Yeah, they are. Like they're so.
It's so true. Yeah, it's like failure is really such a great teacher. Yeah. And it's like insecurity robs us from learning because we're scared to fail. And like, especially learning a language and like applying yourself in another country, like people, like 99.9% of the time are going to be super welcoming
Yeah.
to you, like applying yourself to learning their language. I mean, and especially an American, like you're here, like applying yourself to learn, you know, I think most people feel that. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like at least my experience, like I've seen where people are just really grateful. And I think that goes a long way, you know,
Yeah.
in loving others. And I think it's a part of why we encourage students to learn the language, because it's like, it's a part of my ADD. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, I know.
Well, they remember that you
Yeah, they do.
tried.
No, yeah. I think it means a lot to people. So
Yeah.
our closing tradition, not a tradition, but it's
gonna be
one. We're making it a tradition, is worst day, best day. So what was your worst day in Italy? There's no expectations on this answer. So whatever, I mean, whatever.
Or Ireland.
It could have been Ireland.
Yeah. There was a lot of days in Ireland just because of the weather. I think taking like a non-serious route of like the worst day.
It could be funny. Yeah.
So when we first got there, it was like, I mean, it's a couple weeks after we got there. We went to this like festival, like not festival, but like bigger market than usual. And it was, we went with Paul and Eliseo, which were some of our ministry partners, like our main ministry partners over there. And we just got there and we're walking down these like concrete steps and everybody's in, or like most everybody's in front of me, but Ben and Trinity are behind me. And I just wasn't looking down and I skipped a step or something.
Oh my.
And I flew down those stairs. And Ben at first thought he was like, dude, I thought I pushed you on accident. And I was like, no. And like the only reason everybody else turned around is because they heard me fall, because I literally like smacked to the ground. And I literally just like flew down the stairs, and there was like this, it was like the stairs and then there was like a half platform. And so like I remember like it all just happened so fast, but it felt like I was falling forever.
Yeah.
And like when I realized I'd like fell, I was like halfway on the platform, halfway on the stairs, like just laying there. And I was just like, and then after that, I was like, I had to take a minute, and I had like bruised my hip, I bruised my ribs,
No.
I had bruises all the way down my shins.
Oh my.
And
That sounds
so like,
painful.
yeah,
That sounds awful.
yes, it was like, that was definitely one of the worst. And there was other times I definitely fell a lot more than that. Like if you ask any of my team members, they're like, yeah, Chloe fell all the
Oh my
time.
goodness.
But that was the main one. And like, it was,
I'm glad you're okay.
Yeah,
that
same.
sounds terrifying.
yeah. And especially like right after getting there, it was
Unless you
like,
didn't
You're like,
break
great.
anything.
yeah, I know. Like, and I just flew down concrete
coming out of like
stairs.
falling down the stairs with just some bruises, and it's pretty good.
Yeah.
It could have been a lot worse.
Yeah.
That you didn't hit your head.
Yeah, I know, dude. Was it like concrete stairs?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
my
And they were
God.
big. So like, I wasn't expecting, cause you know, like I don't know, it was just down in the town, and
Yeah,
they were
yeah.
just like these thick concrete stairs, and
Wild.
I wasn't paying attention, and I just flew.
That sounds terrible.
It was.
Well,
but
that's good.
I was okay.
Thank you for sharing that. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay. Best day.
yeah, let's go best day. Close it out.
Best day.
I know like worst day, best day. There's probably so many.
There's
options.
there's so many things I could think
Just
of.
give us one of the best days.
I would say probably Christmas Eve. So we had I feel like also like the holidays or something that like going on a global year, like you're like, oh, like I'm gonna miss my family so much, and
Yeah.
like I'm gonna like this is gonna be awful. Like I'm gonna be away from my family, and but Christmas Eve was like one of my favorite days
Wow.
out of my whole global year, because I remember that night we just kind of like everybody we were just all hanging out, and we had there's this family, the Vitter family, and they had a whole bunch of kids, and we stayed up till like 12 o'clock, and we were all just like, we all like, I think we met and made cookies and stuff, and we just had like this huge dance party with all the kids. And it was just like so wholesome, and it was just like a really good memory, especially to have during the holidays, like there when you feel like oh, like I miss my family, like, but it was like there was other people there that became my family, and it was so sweet. It was just like one of my favorite memories, just because we had so much fun and we were just doing the littlest thing, like just dancing to music with the kids. And then there's so many days on top of that, like camp, like days at camp at the end of the year, like just getting to spend those days with the kids and the even the junior coaches in the community, and just being able to dance with them and do music and sports and stuff like that. It was just awesome.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
So good. Well, thanks for being here with us.
Thank you, Chloe.
Yes, of course.
This has
Thanks
been
for having
great.
me.
It's good to hear your story. Obviously, me and Lee have heard a lot of it, but for other people to get to hear your story, and you know, it's why we do it. So people who are considering this can really get a good picture of what it's like, some of the challenges. So for anybody listening now, if this is something that you're considering or interested in, check out globalyear.org / what's the application? Check out globalyear.org. That's the website. You can check out what we do, who we are, and all that. And then there is an application on the website that they can go to and apply. And we would love to have you be a part of it. So anyway, Chloe, thank you.
There's just one more thing I wanted to add.
Oh yeah, please.
At like our prayer meeting this morning, your mom said, Miss Natalie, she said, like, you don't realize that the investment that you're taking is not just for 9 months, but it's an investment for your whole life. And it's going to make a huge impact on your whole life and just the heart change in general. And so like, just remember that when you're going into a global year, or even any year that you take to dedicate to the Lord. Like, it's going to impact your...
It's not just 9 months.
Yeah, it's not just 9 months, but it's an investment for your whole life.
It's so good. That's like our slogan. A year of memories and eternal impact. So it's like, it may just be a year, but it's definitely going to be an impact that'll last forever. So, anyway, thank you.
Yes.
Great.